both those of you here in person and those on live stream. Before we get our program started, we need to take care of a few orders of business. Thank you. First, I'd like to invite Judy Brockman, Board Treasurer, to the podium to present our board slate.
On behalf of the nominating committee, I would like to present the slate. And the nominating committee consists of Beth Wayne Brandon, Rick Karn, and myself. And it is my pleasure and honor to be able to present the slate. For president is Larry Mack from Cleveland. Vice president is Sue Ann Hochberg from Toledo. Myself as the treasurer and secretary. Joshua Lemmerman from Akron. As a board member, Paul Hervey from Canton, Greg Miller from Cincinnati, Patty Caruso from Dayton, and Jessica Lev from Youngstown. Thank you.
Great. And since this is a recommendation from a committee, we don't need a second, so all in favor of the slate as presented, please say aye. Great. Thank you, Judy, and congratulations to the new board members and officers. I'd now like to ask Howie Beagleman to come forward to present a few farewell tributes.
Thank you. We have one departing board member this year, and we have two JCRC professionals that also left to other jobs. Just want to say quick farewell thank yous to Bob Freeman from our Canton community, who's on our board. Bob has been here certainly since I've been here, but even before me, for a long time with the OJC. Being here a long time is not something that has made him not open to new ideas. He was always ready to listen and to innovate and to change. And he was also always willing to step up and to make sure that OJC had what it needed to do, resources it needed. And specifically, I really want to thank him because of his work and his commitment. OJC now has $100,000 in an endowment type of fund, which was the first time we ever had that in our history. So I really want to thank Bob for all his work, and we know we're going to work with him again. In Cincinnati, both Jackie Congedo left the JCRC director position to go work for the Holocaust Humanity Center, and Justin Kirchner left the associate JCRC position to go work as the regional director for American Jewish Committee. Jackie, and I think you and Justin are both online. You had a lot of balls in the air, Jackie, all the time. You never dropped any of them. The JCRC work didn't suffer because of the government relations work, or vice versa. And you always had a focus both on our own community's needs, but also on the outside community and our allies and coalition partners as well. And Justin, you had always kept the focus on our advocacy, on our outreach. Sometimes things tend to get lost when something is urgent. You never let something urgent get in the way of the important. And I wish you both, everyone well in their new roles. And I know that you're not strangers here, and we're going to continue to work with you in the future.
Great, thank you, Howie, and I'd like to add my congratulations and thanks to Bob, Jackie, and Justin as well. Now I'd like to introduce our panels. The bios of all of our speakers and moderators are in your programs. The first panel we'll have will be Ohio Treasurer Robert Sprague in conversation with David Heller. Following that, Senator Matt Dolan and Representative Juanita Brent will be in conversation with Brad Caston. And our final panel will be Assistant Minority Leader Thomas West and Representative Jason Stevens in conversation moderated by Amy Kaplan. So why don't we get the first panel started?
Well, Mr. Treasurer, let's see, is this working? Can you hear? You might be able to hear us without the mic. Maybe if I turn it on. There we go. What a trick. Well, welcome. It's great to be here, and it's great to spend some time with you. You know, to be able to sit up here in front of our supporters out here and be sitting with one of our biggest supporters is really a thrill for me, and it's a thrill for our organization to be able to spend some time with you and to spend some time with someone that's been so committed to issues that are important to us. You know, when I think back to your career when you were in the House and the work that you did to double the size of investments in foreign bonds, that was something that you took on long before you were treasurer. Maybe if you could talk to us a little bit about how that came about and maybe some opposition you may have heard from the community. The results were incredible because it passed overwhelmingly, but there's always backlash. Maybe give us a little bit of history on that.
Sure. So just by way of history, the Treasury is about $28, $29 billion, depending on the day. And that's a lot of money by anybody's standards. When I got into the legislature, you were allowed to invest 1% of the state's portfolio in foreign-issued debt that was of the highest investment grade and that had never defaulted on their debt. And Israel bonds happen to be that one piece of debt that meet that very stringent criteria for investment by the Ohio Treasury. And Israel bonds have been invested in the Ohio Treasury for the last 30 years. And so there's been a number of different treasurers before me that have blazed this path and made investments in Israel bonds. But one of the things that's really terrific about Israel bonds for the state's portfolio is that it's one of the highest yielding bonds that we can buy, that we are allowed to have in our portfolio. And it has a liquidity premium that's advantageous. And also, because of that liquidity premium and the non-callable nature of the bonds, it allows us to extend the duration of the portfolio. So that's a bunch of gibberish to say that they're great investments for the taxpayers of the state of Ohio. And so when I got into the legislature, there was a massive movement to actually to boycott, divest, and sanction the state of Israel. And during that time, we had a number of different pieces of legislation that were introduced. And one of them was introduced by my colleague Kirk Schuring that was actually an anti-boycott, divest, and sanction bill. And I went to him and I said, Kirk, I really like this bill. I like it because I don't think that the financial system should be used as a weapon against one of our allies, our only ally in the Middle East, and certainly one of our strongest allies in the world. And furthermore, I don't like the attitude and the insinuation that because it's anti-Semitic, and I think that that's wrong, and I want to support you in your bill. And furthermore, I'd like to double the amount of the investment that's allowed in the state treasury. This is when I was state rep. And Kirk said, well, we'll have to vet that through committee and see how that flies. And we were able to make the argument that this is a tremendous value for the Ohio taxpayer. And it's also the right thing for us to do for our ally, Israel. And it flew through and got broad bipartisan support, overwhelming support, as a matter of fact. And then when I got into the Treasury, I had the pleasure of actually being able to execute that policy and buy Israel bonds.
And you've done that, and you've done it in a big way. And I don't know if the folks in the audience here know this, but the state of Ohio is the second largest state investor of Israel bonds behind the state of New York. So congratulations to you to giving us that distinction. And one of the other things I failed to mention was in this bill that you worked on, also counties can invest as well. And one of the things that being such an advocate for this, you've been very outspoken on this, and what a good investment it has become, which is obviously critically important to the people in this room. But also, many counties now are investing in Israel bonds where there's probably not, if there's one or two Jews in the entire county, I would be surprised. So a lot of the desire has been because it's been a great investment, and I think also because the Christian community has really stepped up and said, this is important for us and something that we would like to see invested in. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you've heard out there in the state of Ohio?
Sure. I think one of the things that we can do at the state treasury is we're always looking for ways to use the power of the treasury. And one of that is just by setting an example. And so if we can set an example in our portfolio to allocate some percentage of our portfolio and get tremendous returns for the taxpayers, I think it shows the county treasurers and city treasurers, our local government officials, that they can do it too. And I think that's kind of a way for us to maybe blaze a little bit of a trail in that way. But that language was critical to allow them to invest in Israel bonds. And the reason that language was so important is because if you're a county treasurer or you're a city treasurer, the reality is you're limited in terms of the yield that you can get on your investments. And so this is an opportunity really for them to increase the yield that they could get on their investment portfolio. And as you described, for a multitude of reasons, but the primary one is that it's a great investment for the taxpayers and for a great addition to their portfolio. They may have made increasing investments in Israel bonds. And I noticed Michael here earlier, and I told Michael he could go around and sell some after my sales pitch of Israel bonds. Is that okay? But we think it's a great investment for local government and the state government as well.
That's great. That's great. And Treasurer, you've also been involved in some programs, one of them called Results Ohio, which is really focused on certain key areas in our state, both in the social service component with a program called Stable Accounts and another one dealing with agricultural, the Ag Link program. Can you talk a little bit about those two programs and why you're so passionate about bringing those forward to the residents of Ohio?
Sure, absolutely. I'll tell you, when I took office, I wanted to accomplish three things in the Treasurer's office. I wanted to be a good steward of taxpayer dollars. I wanted to be a bold innovator for the people of the state of Ohio, because my belief is that finance matters. And the third thing is I wanted to be a wise investor with our portfolio. And we talked about wise investment, and we could talk a little bit about stewardship, but our Results Ohio program falls under that bold innovator for the people of the state. And I'll tell you, in my experience in the legislature, is that it's very hard to reform state government from within the bureaucracy sometimes. And when I got in the Treasurer's office, I wanted to create a financial tool that allowed communities through private work and private investment to be able to solve their own problems. And if it worked, then the state would step in and pay for it. And we're only going to pay for the things that produce results, and that's why we call it Results Ohio. And we just recently got this program off the ground. And so our first project is down in Appalachia, Ohio, to begin to close the medical gap that exists in some of these counties. And are any of you from Appalachia, Ohio? And we got one proud Appalachian Ohioan in the back there.
No, I'm just the executive director in Hillel.
Oh.
I'm not Appalachian, just a Jew in Appalachia.
Okay, all right. And so you can probably testify to this, that in many of the counties in southeast Ohio, there simply is not a lot of availability of medical care because the doctors tend to live in Franklin County and maybe not Jackson or Vinton. And so as a result of that, the kids there weren't optometrists, and so they weren't getting eye exams. And so the Foundation for Appalachia, Ohio put up $1.3 million to begin a pilot project that actually took a mobile clinic to try to close these gaps in care. And so they're going around to all the different Title IX schools in those counties, and I got to go down for an example of this. And so I arrive at the middle school, and they whisk me in, and they said, Robert, they said, Sophia, who's 10 years old, she just got out of the eye exam clinic. Why don't you help her pick out some eyeglasses? I'm like, great, I've got 5 kids. I feel sure that I could do this. Like, Sophia, how about these glasses over here, these pink glasses? And she looks up at me, she's trying to figure out how to say no to the treasurer of the state of Ohio. She's like, no, I don't want those. I want these blue ones over here. And she puts them on, and this huge grin spreads upon her face. And I'm like, wow, Sophia feels great in these glasses. Like, she loves these. She loves the way she looks in them. And she walks off. She's extremely proud. And I thought, this is great. And the optometrist pulls me by the sleeve. He said, Robert, he said, I can tell you that Sophia's never had an eye exam before because she cannot see. So these eyeglasses will absolutely change what she can do in school. And the reason that they were right, we know that eyeglasses work, right? That's not what we're testing in this model. But what we're testing is this ability to deliver clinical care through a mobile solution to try to hit underserved communities and be able to extend our reach of Medicaid and make a difference in kids' lives. So we hope that it's going to be a great success. That's just the first program. I hope that there's many more to come.
That's fantastic, and thank you. And I want to leave time for the other panels, but I do have one last thing that I want to talk about, and it's something that is something I've spoken about quite a bit, and that is your speaking up and speaking out against Jew hatred in our society. And I use that term intentionally. Instead of calling it anti-Semitism, I'm going to call it what it is, which is Jew hatred. And it is something that is, unfortunately, a real challenge in our society. And Robert, you have called me on numerous occasions when when rockets were falling on Israel last summer, you called me and said, what can I do? What can we do as a community? And that was just really special and really showed that you cared and wanted to know how you could help personally. And more importantly, I think you just wanted to let me know that you were thinking about the Jewish community and people that are friends of Israel. That goes a long way. Where does it come from that you have it in you to speak up and speak out against anti-Semitism and Jew hatred?
Well, I think two things. First of all, I really despise that sort of persecution. I think it's wrong. And so I'm proud to stand with Ohio Jews and proud to stand with Israel and stand up to that hatred. And the second piece, I want to give credit where credit is due. I think Howie Beagleman has done a great job. My mind is like a steel trap, and it's very difficult to get things in. And Howie has done a great job helping educate me. I didn't know that the word anti-Semitism was a made-up word by a German, and Howie gave me a great book. He's been very patient with me in helping educate me, and I think the OJC has had a tremendous amount to do with that as well. And my friendship with you, and Brad Caston as well, and many of my friends, and Josh, and many others. So I think, so many times in our country, we seem to have shouting matches instead of conversations. And I think that that's one of the fundamental things that's wrong with our nation right now. And it's great to have friends in the Jewish community that can help guide leaders like me to be able to stand up for the right thing.
One of the things that I try to take every moment that I can to remind, particularly when I'm with public officials, we know we've been experiencing this Jew hatred for 2,000 years, and the goal is not for it to go away, although we'd love that. The goal is to get it back under the rock that it belongs, and to keep it there as long as we possibly can. And when it rears its ugly head, it usually rears its ugly head because clergy allows it to happen and politicians allow it to happen. And when it goes away, it's because clergy speaks out and politicians speak out. And I'm not just talking about the last 50 years or 100 years. I'm going back hundreds of years and thousands of years. And this is something that we see repeated over and over again. So when I'm with a public official, I always want to say thank you, and thank you to the other public officials here. Speak up, speak out, and make sure that it's not accepted at all in our society. And the other thing, and this is something, again, where, Robert, you've been very helpful with, is, and this I learned from Deborah Lipstadt, who is now representing the United States on anti-Semitism, and that is that if you happen to come from the left or you're a Democrat and you see some anti-Semitism, don't call out the right or the Republicans on their anti-Semitism. Call out the anti-Semitism within your own party. And when you're on the right and you see anti-Semitism on the left, don't worry about that. Worry about calling out the anti-Semitism within your own party, because it exists in both parties. And I think it's going to be a stronger voice when people speak up and speak out against things that are happening in their party. And we had an instance, Robert, where some things were happening in the state, and you called me and you called Howie and you said, educate me. What's going on? Well, how can I help? How can I bring clarity and light to this? And that was exactly what was needed at the time, and we got past it, and that was very helpful. And I think if more politicians could be like you, where they want to, instead of just being out there and in a screaming match, but out there in a learning opportunity and saying, how can we get to a better place, and how is this affecting, we'll all be in a better spot. So thank you for that. And with that, we'll turn it over to the next panel.
So just one thing I do want to say, because, and David mentioned this, it should have been, I think, on the beginning of the agenda, but I just wanted to recognize Howie for your efforts. I mean, David and I have been doing this for a long time, and we've worked with a lot of great people, but it's a lean staff Howie has, Catherine, Howie, and the impact you're making is just something we all appreciate. Welcome, Senator, Representative. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
I think to start, I'm not going out on a limb when I say that these are challenging times. And to that point, I also want to say how grateful we are that both of you are getting into the arena, because it's not always fun. In fact, in these challenging times, a lot of times it's not fun. So we're grateful for your willingness to do that. So with that said, let's kick this off right there. I mean, what are you seeing in your office, in your role as a leader, that's keeping you up at night? And I'll start with you, Representative.
Well, people are concerned about safety in all communities, and I know for myself, I have a very rich community, and then I have poor parts of my community too, but everyone feels safe and secure. People want to feel seen in government, and so I think that's the biggest thing, that people don't always feel seen in the decisions that are happening at the state level.
So there's two questions there. And these are indeed challenging times, but I would challenge you to find any politician at any moment in time in which they served, in which they didn't recognize these were challenging times. But the challenge that's unique to this time, for me, is that we are, the old saying is everyone can have an opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Well, that's been morphed into truths. We rely on our own facts mainly because we are given information very one-sided. We aren't exposed to both sides of an argument. Therefore, those facts become the truth. And when your truth gets challenged, instead of it being an exercise of dialogue, of exercise of where we can learn from each other, it is, you are challenging my truth. Therefore, you must be a liar because your opinion is wrong. And then liars can't be trusted. Liars don't want to be my friend, and the divide continues. So what frustrates me today is that, earlier panel talked about learning, the treasurer wanted to learn, is we need more politicians and individuals who are in the political world to be willing to learn, to be willing to listen, to recognize that I represent 350,000 people, other senators do the same. Each rep represents about 110,000 people. They got duly elected. Listen to them. They represent part of Ohio. That's the part that keeps me up at night, is that we aren't recognizing that there's opportunities for all of us to learn.
So, to that point, and David and the treasurer touched on this, I'll tell you what's keeping this room up at night. It's security. Just down the street here is the Jewish day school where my children went. Through literally a stroke of luck, somebody surfing the internet, we found out just a month ago that there was a security officer at our school who was about to commit real damage, real danger, and we were lucky. College campuses across the state, events in Cleveland, Cincinnati. This is what security is, what is keeping us up at night. It's what is a huge cost item to our organizations, our schools, our temples. And we're grateful for the funding, Budget Chairman over in the House, that you guys, the funds you have through Howie's work, provided to us for security. I guess my question on that is, are we doing a good enough job educating the legislature? Do you think look, you're from Cleveland. You have probably one of the largest Jewish community districts in the state.
You're fine, you're correct.
No, you've got my compassion for that. And I say to Howie all the time, I love the Jewish people, it's Jews. I'm like, no, and Senator, you're from Cleveland. So, I mean, do you think your fellow senators and representatives are aware of our security needs, how important and vital the funds you're providing to us are? And, and I guess then the second part of that is, and if not, what more could we be doing?
Well, I know people have been doing this since we've been having a conversation, but I really feel like Howie, and this is not to give him a raise, but Howie has been a vital part of just educating, like the treasurer said, even myself, about different things that I didn't know. And sometimes you come into this space thinking you know everything, and then you have someone like Howie who is educating you. So even having someone who's constantly showing up and telling people like, no, that's not correct, let me reschool you on that, is vital so we can make the correct actions. And having conversations, I'll just say, Senator Dolan and I, our districts are right next to each other, and sometimes we have to sit down and talk and have hard conversations. But I'm fortunate, very fortunate, that I have someone that I can talk to when issues like that do come up, because we do have communities that share a lot of common interests. So we as colleagues have to talk to each other within our communities, and that doesn't happen enough. And I'll say this with confidence and not because you're sitting here. I know if I call Senator Dolan, he'll pick up the phone. But then there's times, sometimes within the General Assembly, we're not always so friendly to each other. And that really becomes a distraction of taking care of the people's business when Howie and others come to us about concerns. So we have to get people who are willing to communicate and willing to act together for us to get things done going forward.
Well, thank you for those nice words. Look, it wasn't lost on me that on a beautiful afternoon at 1:30, there's a Columbus police officer sitting outside this building. That there's very few outward awareness of this, that this is a temple. So security is very much 24/7 for you. And yeah, I think we are starting to understand that a responsibility of places of worship in schools, unfortunately this day, is to be able to, quote, harden them, to make sure that they are safe for worship, they are safe for kids. What more could you do? I'm going to jump on the Howie bandwagon. Well, Howie could call me 20 times a day instead of the 15 times a day that he calls me during the budget. But again, I'm going to be a broken record here. It's awareness, because I think our legislature is willing to put money toward hardening. What I think we're not willing to do yet is have that discussion as to why we have to harden these schools and what steps could we be taking to prevent the, all the tools that we're putting in place. There are things we could be doing so these never have to be in use, that officer sits there day in and day out with nothing to do. That's where I think we need to have a more thorough discussion about what is happening in our country.
Thank you. So you both mentioned you're from Cleveland. Senator, I would say your district's probably slightly more rural, and you're slightly more urban. It just makes me ask the question, in your day, how do you work across the aisle or across the geography to make, someone in Bellefontaine, Ohio, understand what you're dealing with in Shaker Heights, or how someone in Ashland, Ohio, would understand how, what you're doing in your area? Are the representatives, are they cooperating? Are they understanding? Are they communicating? And how does that impact your day?
There you go.
We have to talk to each other. Like, it's not even an option, like, and I'm just using Senator Dolan because he's sitting right next to me. But with our districts touching, we have to sit down and talk to each other. You can't work in silos. And when everyone in this room sees anyone that's in the General Assembly that's not willing to talk to someone, the first thing you need to do is say, you don't need to be in this business of the people. This does not need to be in the business of the people's interests to not talk. And one thing I realized, because I sit as the ranking member on agriculture, so when I tell you I'm going to places of people who've never seen a black person in their life, I'm going to those places. I'm going to a lot of county fairs right now. But people's interests, no matter what part of the state you live in, is the same. They want to make sure they have affordable housing. They want to make sure their kids are safe in the schools. They want to be able to have a good paying job. And those interests don't change no matter what part of Ohio you go to. I mean, I've met people who've lived in trailers. I've met people who've lived in mansions doing agriculture, and the interests are really the same. People want to be able to stay here. They want their kids to come back here after college, hopefully. The interests are really much the same, and so I try to use those points as I talk to my colleagues across the aisle, that we have way more things in common than we don't. And if even you look at how we vote, there's more times or another that we all vote in unison, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. That there are some things, we're not going to get on those topics, where there's a difference of one party to the other party, but there's way more times where we're all voting the same because we're dealing with our families back at home. We're dealing with our neighbors back at home, and it's the same issue. And I'm going to stop because I feel like I'm about to stop. When we're in a community and I'm at the grocery store, I go to the local Whole Foods, people stop me. They ask me about the votes or why I made a vote, or why did I co-sponsor something, why didn't I co-sponsor a bill, and they're showing me screenshots of the Ohio channel. So we can't avoid people, and I still go grocery shopping, but it's just very vital that we work with each other, and the issues across Ohioans are very much the same. We're more alike than we are different.
So everyone's aware of Democrat versus Republican, and that's normal and natural and maybe can be healthy. But a lot of times in the state legislature, it's urban, suburban versus rural. And that really shows its head in the budget, which I'm responsible for, because there are many issues in which the representative's correct. We all agree on it. We all want better education, we all want better health care outcomes, and we want people to get to work. Well, here's an example in a budget where urban, suburban versus rural comes out. Public transportation. For us in Cleveland, it's not a Republican-Democratic issue. It is the essential way in which people get to work, get to school, and get to their doctors. And so when I approach that with rural legislatures, like, well, we shouldn't spend money on public transportation. People can get there. It's a waste of money. And then you put it in terms of, well, is getting people to wellness checks, is that a waste of money? Well, no. Is getting people to school so they can earn a degree a waste of money? No. So forth. Getting people to work. And when they understand, and well, in urban, suburban areas, that's how you get to work. That's how you go to school. So the state does need to make an investment in public transportation. You might not see it in your rural areas, but it is essential to what the representative said, that we have shared goals. How you're going to do that in rural? Well, I'm willing to listen. What is it that we can invest in the rural counties that produces the same results?
Thank you. Senator, you talk about transformational development. I hear you when you go across the state. Specifically, if Howie coached me right, 80% of the budget of these transformational projects do go to Franklin County, Cuyahoga County, Cincinnati. I mean, is it hard to convince a representative from Appalachia or Findlay that that's just how the need is, or how do you do it?
So it can be, but the transformational projects are transformational because of what they're going to have an impact on our state. And where they're located also lots of times depends on workforce, infrastructure, education. So sometimes it's not a matter of convincing them what's right with the project. There's nothing wrong with the project. You're not hurt in any way by this project coming into Cleveland or Columbus. Intel is a win for the entire state. And I come from Northeastern Ohio. We are going to benefit from Intel being here. And so I think once people understand that an investment in Ohio helps Ohio. The revenues get dispersed 88 counties. The reputation of the state gets dispersed 88 counties. Education levels go up. So it may initially be like, why does everything go to Cleveland? Why does everything go to Columbus? Until you recognize that no one loses because it's in Cleveland.
So thank you. So similarly, Representative, you're a strong advocate of public education. but you're also a strong advocate of school choice. So similarly, how does that work, and how do you explain that to people?
So I personally never went to public schools. I don't know if anybody knew that or not. I always went to private schools my whole life. I was very fortunate. My folks paid that huge tuition that looks like a college bill for most. But I do believe in that there is value that our state invests into these systems. We have to make sure that we first make sure we take care of our first baby, and that's our public school systems. But there also has to be an opportunity for us to also fund the opportunity for people to have school choice too. Right now, school educating our kids is one of the most important topics. I don't care what legislator you talk to, what side of the aisle they're sitting on, if they're in their first term or in their last term. Everyone's concerned about our kids and when it comes to education. The biggest problem, we're still trying to figure this out, maybe the chairman has it all figured out and I don't know it, but it's how we fund it. That's the biggest thing. And so trying to come up with funding mechanisms is the biggest key to do all of that. And until we, every 2 years, we'll keep on bringing that back to our general budget, our operation budget to handle that, but we have to figure out how we can fund all of that equitably and still make sure that one does not hurt the other. And I think that's sometimes what I'm receiving the feedback when I talk to my school superintendents, that there's concerns about, if we have these funding mechanisms, it's gonna take away from our public schools. And that's what we really need to make sure, that one is not hurting the other. So I know I've been having conversations during our break with some of our school superintendents as well as school board members as different ideas of how do we fund that. Some states are using a tire tax, where every time you get a new tire, you're paying a tax towards that. We also are looking at, there was an idea that someone said that there should be a tax on, it was something else, I'm not even gonna bring it up because it sounds ridiculous, but just other opportunities on how we could fund that. And I think once we come up with a even ground, then we can just show the world how Ohio is really putting all of our children first, particularly when it comes to education. Because if we're not concerned about how our kids are being educated and it being properly funded, then we're really doing a disservice to all of our communities.
So well said. I'm getting the hook, so I didn't get to ask about my two Cleveland friends, who's going to be our quarterback this fall for the Browns. But so we got saved by the bell. But seriously, on behalf of everybody, thank you for joining us here today. Thank you for your leadership, and let us know how we can help you build these bridges you're building.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So thank you both for being here. I'm going to follow up on some of the themes you've been hearing. We have two state representatives up here from different parties, but more importantly for this discussion, from different kinds of districts. You represent a more rural district in Appalachia, and yours is a more smaller urban district, Canton, right? I have family in Canton. Right. Even though I'm from Cleveland. And, but one of the things I want to start out asking you is, there are many large economic development projects going on. Intel, of course, the Lordstown plant, Ford plant in Lorraine. How do you help your constituents benefit from those kinds of economic development projects that are perhaps adjacent to or nearby your districts, but not in your districts?
I love that question. Thank you so much. And let's not forget Amazon and the Pro Football Hall of Fame are other large projects. By the way, that's the Grind 49 for those of you who don't know Canton. But one of the things that I did a couple GAs ago I noticed that workforce was a major issue in our community and getting people connected. You had jobs out there, but you had individuals that didn't have jobs. How do you connect the individuals with that to the jobs? And as someone said earlier, Intel is going to affect the whole state, including our district. So all of these different projects are looking for talent, looking for workers. So what I did a couple years ago was able to get a $300,000 grant and connected our urban leagues to the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. Why? Because they were the job makers. And they produce what they call navigators. And we need a diverse or interdisciplinary team to be able to connect with individuals where they are. Even if they didn't even know how to fill out an application, they were able to assist them in doing that and bringing them up to speed to where they can get to work. So these navigators not just connect people to jobs, but through jobs. Because anybody that gets a job, usually what happens? Okay, the car breaks down as soon as you started working. Or you lost your child care. A lot of different things happen. Well, these navigators are there now to be able to support them through that process and get them connected to the services they need. Another thing we did was we beefed up the small business. So we got money in the budget to be able to help people start small businesses, because as these large individuals or these large companies come about, they're going to need contractors. They're going to need smaller agencies to be able to provide some of these services, whether it's toilet paper or whether it's, just being able to rope off the whole entire area. Small business, whether it's minority businesses or women-owned businesses, we were able to get some money to be able to actually bolster our minority business, our women-owned businesses in our county. And that was very successful in the first year. During COVID, they went from 50 membership to over 150 membership. That's the kind of stuff that, you do boots on the ground. Not everything is about legislation. Some of it's shaking the trees and making certain that the resources or the fruit gets down to the people. And that's what I've been able to do back home.
Thank you for the question. Thank you to Howie for the invite. When Treasurer Sprague asked if anybody is from Appalachia, I raised my hand. And we always say it like you would throw an apple at you is how we pronounce it. That's how we can tell if you're really from there. Well, but no, it really is an honor to be here, and I really appreciate the time we can spend together, because just to give some perspective, my district in southern Ohio is about 1,500 square miles. It's larger than the state of Rhode Island. I can drive an hour and 45 minutes, never leave my district, and still be in my district and get out. Now, that's a weird thing, is to drive an hour and 40 minutes, get out and go knock doors in a neighborhood, right? But just to give some perspective, and it's not that it's that far, as you look at it on the map, but all of our roads are crooked, because we have a lot of hills and ridges and whatnot. But I will say this. The economic opportunities that come to Ohio are, they're vital for our area as well. And it is the opportunity that our people need, and it's that hope that, all Ohioans look for. And I think, the previous speakers and Senator Dolan spoke to this. A lot of times we'll say, well, this city or that city got it. I think it's important for all of Ohioans to recognize that, our cities are a fantastic economic engine, but also the rural areas and the Appalachian areas are also a resource. They're a resource for employees, recreation, there's natural resources. And I think it's one of those things, as we look at Ohio, all of these things, although they're different, they're actual strengths. And it's one of the things that I've really enjoyed about being, in the state legislature. I spent almost 20 years as a county elected official and as a commissioner and as a county auditor, and bringing that and understanding, that local government, but understanding the state and being able to travel to Canton, to Cleveland or, Columbus or Cincinnati, and then go to MacArthur in Benton County, which is one of my counties I represent. There's 11,000 people in the entire county. And the town of MacArthur, it's as close to Mayberry as you could imagine. And everybody knows everybody, and it's wonderful. There's the pizza shop and, and all that. So, but it's understanding that opportunity is there. When something good happens in Ohio, it's good for all of Ohio. And it's bringing that type of attitude and understanding that, I think is going to help us to continue to grow as a state.
Thank you. So, continuing on in the theme of commonalities, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, your districts are very different, but when you go home and you go to a town hall or you're knocking on doors during a re-election campaign, what are the top 3 issues you hear from your constituents? And would you predict that they're very similar for the constituents in each of your districts?
I'll go first on this one. I should have went first on the other one. It is a, when you talk to individuals, it doesn't really matter what their background is the economy usually is what is top of mind. And whether it be in the broader sense or whether it be, Johnny got a job down at the plant, or Johnny's, went to college, or he's, going through an apprenticeship, or, what is the granddaughter doing? There is the economic well-being, and I think it's so important. If we have that economic stability, that then a lot of our other issues tend to take care of themselves. And I think that is important. The other thing that I think is important is that, and I think this is true of all of our communities, we all care about our people. We care about our family, but we also care about our neighbors, and it's how do we help them improve? How do we take people who have a similar background, and I consider similar Ohio, how do we help them to improve and help them to get a leg up? How do we get, whether it's writing a reference letter for somebody, but or putting in a good word for them before a job interview, those types of things, how we help our young people. But, really the topics are economic generally, as far as what they really worry about. Now, depending on if it's football season or not, we're going to worry about the, if the Ironton Fighting Tigers are going to make it to the state championship again. But anyway, that we'll save that for fall.
Well, when it comes to football, they always talk about McKinley Bulldogs. I'm just saying. But no, I think, and that's a hard question, because this week, obviously, with the Supreme Court ruling, you hear a lot of conversation around reproductive health. But prior to that, you heard a lot about gun violence. You heard a lot about, teachers being armed. So it goes in phases about what we're talking about, criminal justice system before that. But some of the things that when I look at, when I talk to my constituents, it comes down to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Our basic needs are always first. We need to make certain that individuals have food, clothing, and shelter. And with the inflationary times, right now, housing has hit the roof. I mean, people are paying $1,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. In downtown Canton and some of the new developments, $1,600 for a 900 square foot apartment. That's a lot of money. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm trying to fill my own roots there, but it's a lot of money, and it's like, how do people meet their needs? So helping individuals be able to do that. That's why it's important for us to tie them to the Intel jobs where they're paying $130,000 an average job. I'm going to get one of those jobs, by the way. Don't know if you guys know that. But it's very important for us to deal with family. One of the things you'll see me in the legislature, I'm working on families, health, and workforce. Those are very key issues in my district. Family, right now we need to make certain that we're bringing families back together. Every parent needs to be in their kids' lives. Let me say that differently. Both parents need to be in their kids' lives. And we need to make certain that shared parenting happens and that it should not cost you $100,000 to stay in your kid's life if you separate. So House Bill 508 is going to help do that. We need to make certain that, and Peter Benson talks about asset building and how, the more assets you have, the more likely you'll succeed in life. Well, if that's the case, then we need to make certain that the both parents have, the biggest assets a child can have stays in that kid's life. So that's one of the things we do. Also, healthcare. When we talk about right now, healthcare is a big issue, access to healthcare, making certain that individuals are not being ripped off by the prescription drug chain. So one of the bills we brought forward was PBM bills to address pharmacy benefit managers to make certain that individuals could go to the pharmacy and make certain that they're paying the right cost. Those are issues that obviously everyday citizens don't know about a PBM. When I first heard about it, I thought it was peanut butter and mayonnaise. But the reality is, when you tell people about prescription drug costs,
Right.
they
Everybody
understand
knows about that.
Yeah. So those are some of the things that I see each and every day when I go home. And I'll just one last statement. There was a pharmacist. Literally, I was out knocking doors, and he stopped me in the middle of this major street. And I'm putting my signs up, and believe me, he pulls up on the sidewalk because there was nowhere to park. And he just tells me, and he starts to show me all of these things on his phone of how they are ready to, they're trying to shut him down as a single pharmacy, small business. And I said, and that was somebody who was on a campaign trail a few years ago. And that issue we're still fighting today. And not only it started here, but now it's a nationwide issue that we keep fighting. So keep woke, make certain you understand your bills, and make certain that people are not ripping you off.
Thank you. I want to finish by asking you about coalitions between the Jewish community and your community. So, Representative West, there's been a historic, century-long at least, alliance between the Black community and the Jewish community, at times stronger than others. What can we do as a Jewish community to make that alliance as robust as possible with the Black community? And in your case, Representative Stevens, there's less of a historic partnership between the Jewish community and a more remote rural community like Appalachia. And yet there are a lot of common issues because, as we've seen, there are people are people, needs are needs, communities have very similar needs. What kinds of things can we do as a Jewish community to help support the needs of Appalachia and build coalitions in your district? I'll let you go first this time.
Yeah, let me start with saying this. Whether you're in Appalachia or whether you're in the inner city of Canton, it's not about red or blue. It's about red, white, and blue. It's about the United States of America and us fighting for all individuals. Number two, it's not white or black, it's what's right, right? We need to make certain that we are fighting for what's right. And I believe that the Jewish community has always stood with the African American community. And even in our community now, we have, of course, Rabbi Spitzer and Rabbi Adlin, and they was on the Martin Luther King Commission, and they now have an event every Martin Luther King week. And they produce that, and we all support that, and we all go, and we all sup together. We all enjoy each other's company. You know,
breaking bread together helps a lot.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, by the way, you can invite me anytime. But I will tell you, and my wife will tell you, we'll come to dinner. We don't have no problem doing that. But that is what it takes. You know, me and my wife went to Darrell Kick's house, Representative Darrell Kick. And, you know, Darrell Kick's a farmer. And me and him struck it up. We're great friends. We obviously have some things that are, you know, we don't agree on. But there's a lot that we do agree on. And I think even in our Jewish community, we need people to continue to speak up and speak out. Don't be afraid to speak up. When you see wrong, it's time for us to speak out about that. And that's whether you're in a black community, white community, Jewish community, we all need to speak out when it's wrong. You got some good people and you got some bad people, right? You got some good things that happen and some bad things happen. We need to make certain that we continue to speak out for what's good versus what's bad.
You know, in the Cleveland community and the Federation, we work very hard to build these partnerships and understand communities that may seem different than ours, but really are not. And as David Heller ended his comments with asking elected officials and people to speak out against anti-Semitism, we also feel impelled to speak out against issues of hate and prejudice, no matter which community it affects. Yeah. And I think that's the bottom line for building these kinds of coalitions. How about rural? Rural and urban.
You know, it's really interesting to me because coming from an area, and it's really interesting, our area, not to get too geographical, but you know, a lot of our population is along the river. We're near Huntington, West Virginia, Ashland, Kentucky, but also, you know, once you get further out into the country, it becomes a much more rural, urban, you know, Appalachia. My grandmother was one of 12. My great-grandmother was one of 17. And so that really helps during election time in a small area. Every you know, I got a lot of cousins. Thomas. And this is, if I might just say this real quickly, just had been appointed state rep a few years ago. Governor DeWine invited us over to the mansion for a breakfast, you know, the new state reps. And I come in and I take my coat off. It was January, and I was the first one there. And I was just so excited. I was like, oh, I'm getting to go to the governor's mansion. And this young lady comes in and she takes my coat and she looks at me and, you know, she's like, are you Representative Stevens? And I was like, yes. And she goes, are you from Proctorville? I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, do you know my grandma who owns the, I said, do I know her? I said, we're cousins. I said, you know, so I go to the governor's mansion and a cousin. So, you know, that's just a very Appalachian thing. But nevertheless, one of the things that was mentioned earlier was the issue of security and security of our places of worship. And I can't tell you how upsetting it is that we have to worry about such a thing. I mean, and we worry about it too. You know, I mean, it's something that, you know, my grandparents were founding members of the congregation where we attend. My father is in leadership there. He's an elder. And I'm part of that as well, of course. It's something that we worry about every Sunday. And we worry about it, you know, every time we gather. And it's something that we shouldn't have to, but it's naive to not. And, you know, it's very upsetting. You know, I get mad about it, really, but it is something that I think as the state we cannot be naive about. And I think as we look at these types of things, you know, and as we're able to broadly address these throughout the state of Ohio, I think that's something that we have in common. Because, you know, if you can't practice your faith safely, then what is it all about? So I think there's something there that we have in common. But I also think we also have a hope. You know, one of the things that I always try to talk to kids, I get a lot of chances to talk to kids. I have 3 sons, 26, 24, and 18, almost 19. My legislative aide is here. She went to school with a few of them. So Mason is from that area. So I always get a lot of chances to talk to young people, and I think it's important that we provide not only areas, any area of Ohio, but especially to say, I believe in you, you have opportunity, here is what we can do. And my phrase is I always try to tell kids, is don't be afraid to be awesome. It's okay to really go for it. And I think having that hope, but also being, you know, understanding, you know, that there's evil in this world and we have to protect ourselves from that. Those are the things that we all have in common, and that is the kind of thing that I could see, you know, as we go forward in the future, a partnership that really benefits but also strengthens, you know, all of Ohio and our communities. So thank you very much.
So that's a good point for me to end on, and thank the two of you and everybody else here. Some of our elected officials have had to leave, I know, but just to reiterate our thanks as a community for all the support for security enhancement programs that we're able to take advantage of, because it is indeed an issue in our community, and we can't offer thanks enough.
And if I could thank you all for, again, Howie has been a wonderful ally and a connector. You know, when you have a government liaison coming and sharing about what's going on in your community, that is so very, very important. So I do appreciate all the work that you do and all the work that all of you do in making certain that we are educated on the issues that face the Jewish community. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of our panelists today. I'm sure everyone found their remarks to be insightful and thought-provoking. Finally, it's my pleasure to call up our Executive Director, Howie Beagleman, to close out our program with his Director's Report.
Working? Great. So I know we're running over time. Thank you all for being here, being a part of this. I want you to take a moment to imagine that you aren't here, though. Imagine there was no meeting today. imagine there was no Ohio Jewish communities. What would that mean for the things that aren't getting done or are getting done? For starters, we just heard, it would mean a lot of our Jewish communities, a lot of our Jewish agencies wouldn't have a dedicated advocate on Cap Square or on Capitol Hill. What does that look like? There would not be $12 million in federal Homeland Security funds in Ohio. Now, we're going to get a chance, hopefully, to say a formal thank you at some point, but that is because of the leadership and the persistence and the never give up attitude of Senator Rob Portman. It is also because of the advocacy of Ohio Jewish communities. And there are people, not only in Ohio, there are high-value targets in places like Ithaca, New York, that would never have seen $1 of federal Homeland Security funding that are now safer because of this program. And if we did not come and talk to our state representatives and our policymakers about our security needs, there would not be over 80 Jewish agencies in Ohio that have shared almost over 180 different state security grant programs. And just a few weeks ago, in the face of rising threats, the governor and the legislature came together, provided $1 million in supplemental funding for this need. Without OJC, there would not have been millions of dollars in capital projects that were funded this year. Without OJC's advocacy, there would not be $500,000 in funding to help Jewish agencies that deal with senior citizens provide funding to them to help those who are most vulnerable. And about a year and a half ago, when we had the chance in the waning days of lame duck to create an Ohio Holocaust and Genocide Education Memorial Commission, without OJC's advocacy, that probably wouldn't have happened. And without OJC's focus, Ohio might not be one of the states today that has the IRA definition to combat anti-Semitism as law of the land. But that's not what I really want you to think about. I want you to think about what would happen if OJC wasn't here and things were happening. How would they happen? Because a lot of you have heard of the Columbus Way. There's the OJC way of how we do business. We are bipartisan to a fault. We reach out to everyone and work with everyone. Could you imagine, as Treasurer Sprague spoke about before, working on the anti-BDS legislation, working on the legislation to increase funding for Israel bonds? If we weren't leading, what would it look like? What would it look like? Would that legislation have passed? Would it have passed in a bipartisan fashion? Would it have been constitutional? HB 504 just passed the Ohio House a few weeks ago, 95-1. HB 353 passed 79-0. That's how OJC does things. How we do our work, how we accomplish our goals, and the mission that we attach to our vision is as important as what we are advocating on and who we're advocating to. And I actually think you can all help right now as well. First of all, you've seen the work we do, you've seen the impact of our relationships, you see what it means for the Jewish communities and Jewish agencies across Ohio. Please help us by texting Ohio JC to 22525. Every dollar you give us will help one more Jewish agency, one more Jewish community. That's 22525, and it's Ohio JC to 22525. And also, I want you to imagine, you can stop imagining now actually, we're back. OJC is here, and we are here to stay. And we are going to keep doing what we're doing the way we're doing it. We're going to keep focusing on issues that matter, and we're going to keep working with both sides of the political aisle, and we're also doubling down. Because as you can imagine, as you all know, there's no more important time than today for political action in our country. And we are working now on a game-changing opportunity to work with us and be politically engaged on behalf of Ohio's Jewish communities. So we're going to be reaching out to you. Please be ready. Please answer. Because imagine that. We all have work to do together. Thank you.
Thank you, Howie, for that report and for all you do for OJC and our community. I'd also like to thank Catherine Scheller, OJC's Operation and Member Relations Director, for all she does for OJC, and especially for all the work coordinating today's annual meeting. And finally, thank you all for being here. We're adjourned.